Hello everyone and welcome to your cryptocurrency week in review for the week of August 28th to September 3rd. Now, to get started off here, you can see that this week was a bit of a mixed bag. Half of the majors were up and half of the majors were down, with the most important part being that Bitcoin was able to close the week up. However, as you might guess from the title, there was a major event that shook up the closing prices here across the board, which we will discuss shortly. However, real quickly here, I want to point out that the major gainer for this week was Litecoin, which comes as no surprise. If you look back at July and August, Litecoin was consistently, among all of the major cryptocurrencies, the least appreciated. And when I say least appreciated, I mean in terms of price. It was not going up. It was flat around the $40 to $45 range for the majority of those 2 months. And then later in August, when people realized that there's going to be the possibility of atomic swaps between Bitcoin and Litecoin and other compatibility with the Lightning Network, we really started to see Litecoin take off. And I tend to believe that this is an important lesson in terms of if you see a major divergence among one of the major cryptocurrencies against all of the others in terms of price appreciation or any other aspect of it, if there isn't any negative press coverage or any fundamental change to that cryptocurrency, I would consider investing if you understand it well enough to know what some of the potential catalysts are. Because in my opinion, Litecoin was a screaming buy at $45, and it's amazing how long it took for it to finally appreciate to what I believe to be now a fair value. Now, before we move into discussing in more detail some of the moves throughout the week, I just want to briefly bring up some of the changes that we've seen over the month, which is just remarkable. If you look at the month of August, this was one of the biggest gainers across the board with cryptocurrencies, which is especially amazing when you consider the size that cryptocurrencies have grown to. And aside from Ethereum Classic, among the majors, there was not a single cryptocurrency that gained less than 50% for the month of August. Now, on the flip side of this, you could argue that this is more evidence of a bubble, because for any asset class to grow this quickly, it is just almost always going to end in some sort of pain, right? It's part of the boom and bust cycle of Bitcoin and major cryptocurrencies. So moving forward, I would be very cautious and be aware of some of the price movements. I still think we have some legs left in this current bull action that we're seeing, but we are seeing some signs of the opposite happening as well towards the end of this week. So let's get into this week, right? So you can see here from the price action that there's been a couple of major events that have affected price, and we're going to talk through the major three, at least in my opinion. Now, to start off the week, we saw a huge gain and break through the 4,500 level as a result, at least in my opinion, of the North Korean tensions as a result of the ballistic missile test over Japan. Now, I discussed this in a little bit more detail in the second video posted to my channel called Is Bitcoin Replacing Gold? And I discuss Bitcoin versus some of the other safe haven assets there. But essentially, we started seeing a boost in volume once these reports started coming out. And then finally, we saw a major boost in volume the following day that I do believe was sparked by this particular event. So if you want to have some more analysis on that front, check out that video. I probably have it linked somewhere on the screen right now, and you'll have a little bit more information there. Now, moving on, you can see that Bitcoin went all the way up to the $5,000 level. And the psychological barrier there was too high, and we saw a huge crash following it that has basically been the story for the remainder of the week, right? And this was not just Bitcoin that started to crash at this level. It was all of the major cryptocurrencies that started getting affected by the decrease in the value of Bitcoin. And I discussed this in the previous video on this channel called Cryptocurrency Crash, Opportunities in Ethereum and Others. This was really, in my opinion, the first huge opportunity that we've had in the cryptocurrency market over the last 2 weeks or so. And I think that I believe it's not going to be that long-lived, in my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot of buyers. And really, if you consider the fact that Bitcoin closed the week up and it really is still close to its all-time highs, I would argue that this is really, we're not in real bear territory yet. We're not going to be in bear territory until Bitcoin goes below like $3,000. So just keep that in mind. However, there was the last major event of this week, and actually it sort of happened at the beginning of Monday here. I have decided to include it here because it's pretty much the end of the week, right? And you can see here that the ban on ICOs by China really had a major impact on price, and this was another thing that sort of affected major cryptos across the board. And I'm going to discuss this a little bit more, but I tend to think that this might be the first sign that regulatory concerns are a major issue for the entire industry. Now, moving on here, I just wanted to show quickly some of the other major cryptocurrencies so that you can have some idea. You can see that around the September 2nd area, this is when we started to see the drawdown, which you can see is because of Bitcoin, right? And also you can see that the effect of the China ICO ban is also prevalent here in Ethereum. And I'm just going to go through some of these quickly. You can see again, same thing with Litecoin almost reaching $100 per coin and going down now to roughly 75 or so. Again, across the board, the same two catalysts, right? Bitcoin going down and the ban on ICOs. Now, what does this mean? This is actually an interesting point here, is that Bitcoin causing some of the declines in the majors, and you can see this across the board here, right? What's interesting about this to me, and we're going to talk about NEO in a moment here, but what's interesting to me is that the narrative over the last few weeks has been that Bitcoin and altcoins have had a negative correlation. In other words, as the value of Bitcoin has been increasing, we've been seeing the value of altcoins decrease as funds shift over to Bitcoin. However, the long-term correlation between Bitcoin and altcoins has actually been rather positive, and probably around like 0.4 to 0.6 in terms of correlation. And so we're seeing a return to that higher correlation between the major cryptocurrencies. And I really was surprised to find most people thought that altcoins and Bitcoins operate or move in opposite directions, when that really has not been true in the past and was sort of a fluke over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So just something to keep in mind here is that we're seeing those asset correlations among the major cryptocurrencies increase, which means even if you're not paying attention to Bitcoin or not investing in Bitcoin, you should be looking at Bitcoin, as it likely will impact the value of your particular altcoin. Now, lastly here, because of the ban on ICOs by China, of course, NEO gets impacted largely as a result of this. And again, I mentioned in my previous video to stay away from NEO because of the regulatory risk, and here's why. I mean, regulatory risk is actually the biggest single risk to the entire cryptocurrency sector, even beyond the concept that we might be in a bubble. I believe personally that regulatory risk is going to be the catalyst which ultimately serves to bust the current boom that we're seeing in cryptocurrency. So just keep that in mind. So stay away from, in my opinion, stay away from most of the China-driven cryptocurrencies, because China has been consistently always been difficult on most businesses, no matter what sector you're talking about in the markets. And really here, I would say that this was discussed throughout most of the week, right? This was known for the majority of the week. And CoinDesk also had an article that really pointed out that there were some insiders that sort of mentioned that this was going to happen. There was already discussions that were coming to the conclusion that they were going to ban ICOs. What's interesting about this is not only did they do it towards basically saying any future offerings will get punished, but they also applied it retroactively. They're going to actually penalize anybody who had already completed their ICOs if they violated any laws, which is kind of interesting because, of course, most people who are doing these types of ICOs are not fully aware of what the laws are. However, the question is this good or bad, right? Regulatory risk is a real thing here, and I don't like that portion of it. However, in my opinion, ICOs have clearly skated the line between ethical and non-ethical, and most of them, in my opinion, are not ethical. Most of them are really just trying to get rich quickly, and then the token that they actually offer really has no real value. So in my opinion, this is a neutral event. It does sort of, I'm worried that it acts as a catalyst to allow the SEC or some other major regulatory agency to start taking actions in other geographic regions. So just something to point out here is that it does protect investors, but it might sort of be a justification for other regulatory agencies to start taking action against ICOs and maybe cryptocurrencies. Secondly, here I just want to mention that there was sort of a rumor throughout the week in terms of whether or not Moscow would have cryptocurrencies on its stock exchange. And this was sort of spurred by the deputy finance minister saying that basically this should only be accredited investors if we're going to use it on an exchange. And basically Moscow said, okay, we're open to the idea, but we have some plans, but realistically, in my opinion, it doesn't sound like they had too much in place, and that they were surprised by the sudden interest, or I shouldn't say surprised by the sudden interest, but rather were not expecting everybody to think they were going to launch so soon on it. I would not expect anything for at least maybe like 6 months or so, and maybe even longer. I would be surprised to see anything sooner than that. So just something to keep in mind. And lastly here, I just want to point out some more potential cryptocurrency laws in terms of discussing the legality of cryptocurrencies and the acceptance of them as legal tender. We see this happening in the Ukraine over the next 3 weeks or so, and then Russia also declared that they'll probably have something by the end of the year. So the major focus of this week is really regulatory risk, right? This is, in my opinion, again, the most important factor to pay attention to moving forward with cryptocurrencies. What are your thoughts? I hope you guys like this video. If you are interested in more of this type of content as well as some high due diligence videos, leave me a subscription, leave me a like, leave me a comment. I'd be happy to take all of those, and of course I will respond to any of your thoughts. So I will see you guys in the next video.